Expectation damages provide the primary mechanism for resolving a contract breach. Their goal is to place the non-breaching party in the exact financial position they would have occupied had the agreement been fully performed. This principle relies on a strict mathematical rationale. If a promised value is absolute, the compensation for losing it must be equal to the deficit created by the breach. This is the baseline equation courts use to find that number. You take the value of the promised performance, subtract the value of the actual performance, and the remainder dictates the starting point for damages. However, following this literal calculation to its mathematical conclusion can lead to disaster. In the real world, awarding the exact cost to replace a promised performance can mandate massive market inefficiencies and deliver enormous windfalls to a plaintiff.
Instead of automatically dispensing the mathematical difference, judges filter contract text through stringent equitable doctrines. These doctrines act as firm caps on theoretical damages. The two primary mechanisms that modify a payout are the limitation of economic waste and the affirmative duty to mitigate. To understand actual financial recovery, you must treat damages as an algorithm. The literal breach acts as the initial input, but the final number is determined by the pressure of economic reality. In construction and repair contracts, the standard default rule is that a breaching party must pay the cost of performance. This is the exact price required to complete the work as promised. The 1921 case Jacob and Youngs Inc. v. Kent shows why this default rule requires a limit. A contractor built a country residence for an owner at a cost exceeding $77,000. The contract required Redding brand plumbing pipe. Instead, a subcontractor accidentally installed pipe from the co-hose factory. By the time the mistake was found, the plumbing was already encased inside the finished walls. The pipes were functionally identical, and the mistake innocent. The owner demanded literal compliance, but replacing the pipe would require the contractor to demolish substantial parts of the completed home. The expense would be immense, and the finished house would be effectively the same as it was before. The New York Court of Appeals ruled that when the cost of completion is grossly out of proportion to the good attained, the rule shifts. Damages are measured not by replacement cost, but by the difference in overall market value. Because the substitute pipe was equal in quality and cost, the difference in the home's market value was exactly zero. The owner received nothing. In 1962, Peavey House v. Barland Coal and Mining Company pushed this economic waste doctrine to its limit. Willie and Lucille Peavey House leased their farm for a strip mining operation. The contract explicitly required the mining company to perform extensive dirt moving and restorative work at the end of the term to clean up the land. Garland Coal successfully mined the coal from the land, but conceded it failed to perform any of the promised restoration. Here is the financial divergence at the center of the case. Expert witnesses estimated that performing the cleanup would cost Garland $29,000. However, even if the work were done, the total market value of the farm would only increase by $300. The Oklahoma Supreme Court determined the primary purpose of the lease was mutual profit from coal mining. This rendered the cleanup clauses strictly incidental to the main objective. The court relied on state law that prevents a plaintiff from gaining a greater benefit from a breach than they would have gained from full performance. Payouts must be reasonable, barring damages that are unconscionable or grossly oppressive.
Awarding the cost of performance would have given the Peavey houses a recovery 9 times greater than the total value of their entire farm. The court modified the judgment, reducing the payout to the $300 diminution in value. The economic waste filter protects market efficiency by ensuring a non-breaching party cannot use incidental clauses to extract windfalls that are disproportionate to any actual benefit. The second constraint is the doctrine of avoidable consequences, or the duty to mitigate. This requires injured parties to take reasonable steps to minimize their losses after a breach. In Parker v. 20th Century Fox, the court tested the limits of what counts as a reasonable effort. Actress Shirley MacLaine Parker was guaranteed $750,000 to star in a musical film titled Bloomer Girl. The studio scrapped the project. To avoid paying her, they offered her a starring role in a different film for the exact same salary, arguing she had to accept it to zero out her damages. But the specifics didn't match. Bloomer Girl was a musical filmed in Los Angeles that gave Parker rights to approve the director and screenplay. The substitute, Big Country, Big Man was a straight dramatic Western set to film in Australia, with no approval rights. The loss of these approval rights and the shift in genre changed the character of the employment entirely. The court established that an employee is under no obligation to accept substitute work that is inferior or different in kind. Because the new offer was fundamentally a different job, Parker owed no duty to accept it, and the court awarded her full contract salary, as seen in the bankruptcy case in Re WorldCom. Michael Jordan had a 10-year endorsement deal with MCI. When the company rejected the contract, Jordan argued he was a lost volume seller. He claimed he could have handled multiple endorsements at once, so any new deals shouldn't reduce MCI's liability. The breached agreement required very little of his time, just 16 hours a year. The court acknowledged that Jordan certainly had the physical capacity to manage multiple endorsements simultaneously, but a lost volume seller must also prove they would have entered the second contract independent of the breach. This requires proving subjective intent. Jordan's case failed on this point. His own advisors testified to a deliberate strategy to scale back his endorsements to avoid diluting his image while he pursued NBA team ownership. Because Jordan had no actual intent to expand his portfolio, he was not a lost volume seller. He remained responsible for mitigating his damages. While courts protect a party's right to substantial similarity, they will not allow a plaintiff to bypass mitigation through theoretical capacity if their business strategy proves they wouldn't have taken the work. The law requires more than a literal, text-only reading of a broken promise. This is the final algorithm. The expectation calculation must be modified by the filters of real-world impact. First, the economic waste filter caps repair costs by market value when performance is grossly disproportionate to the benefit. Second, the mitigation filter subtracts losses that could have been reasonably avoided, provided the substitute work is qualitatively equivalent. This calculation represents the law's attempt to balance the sanctity of a promise with the requirements of market efficiency. Contract damages ensure substantial justice by requiring compensation for a breach, while preventing the waste of economic resources and the delivery of unearned windfalls.